Hi, welcome to my triangulated analysis. For this project, I analyzed a leveled reader lesson plan from 3 points of view: theoretical background, best practices in comprehension, and alignment with Common Core state standards in reading literature. Before I get started, let me give you a bit of background about Reading A to Z. It is one of 7 features of a larger platform called Learning A to Z. RazKids, HeadSprout, and ReadyTest A to Z are interactive blended learning websites. Reading, Writing, Science, and Vocabulary A to Z are downloadable or projectable resources. None of these offer a curricular scope and sequence because they are leveled resources. But they enhance most existing programs, and they align with a number of state, national, and international standards. Reading A to Z has just about every kind of reading and assessment resource imaginable, all at an affordable price. Because I've been a teacher for almost 2 decades, I know that all teachers sometimes have days on which they are not as prepared as they should be. So when this analysis opportunity came about, I decided to focus on a level reader lesson plan as written in order to assess its strengths and weaknesses. The purpose of this first analysis was to examine the theories behind the lesson. If reading can be described as the process of actively constructing meaning from text, then reading, by its very nature, is a constructivist act. Not surprisingly, the structural features of this lesson all have their foundation in constructivist theories. Running records and miscue analysis are part of psycholinguistic theory. In order to establish groups, assessments must be administered. Running records and miscue analysis are the go-to form of assessment in guided reading. According to Goodman's research, miscue analysis provides windows into the minds of readers. Readers also use semantic, meaning, syntactical, syntax, and graphophonic, visual, cueing systems. Groupings. Once students have been assessed, they are grouped by reading level and/or instructional need. These groupings are born of Vygotsky's theory of social constructivism. Small group and differentiated instruction is tailored to student zones of proximal development, ZPD, because if students are presented with tasks that are not challenging enough or that are too challenging, they will not learn. Tracy and Morrow, page 169. If learning is interaction-based and instruction is scaffolded, students progress within their zone of proximal development. Before reading activities. These are designed to build background knowledge about the subject matter, genre, and structure of the text, and are part of schema theory. According to Cobb and Callis's 2010 study, as cited in Tracy and Morrow, schema theory has had an impact upon reading instruction through its emphasis on the fundamental role of existing knowledge, schemata, in making sense of new knowledge. The use of schema theory through diagrams or discussions of background knowledge, webbing, and the use of non-linguistic representations are part of a constructivist approach during reading activities. These are part of metacognitive theory, which is applied when the lesson plans make heavy use of modeling as well as direct and explicit instruction in reading and comprehension strategies and skills. The goal is to help students become more aware of their own thinking during the reading experience. Tracy and Morrow, page 77. Through responding to such prompts as, does it sound right? Does it look right? Does it make sense? Students begin to internalize these questions so that they can ask them as part of their own metacognitive processes when reading independently. Finally, after-reading response activities. Because schemata is unique to individuals, reading is unique to the reader. It's a transaction between the reader and his or her schemata. Although this theory applies most predominantly to this portion of the lesson, because of responses, it can easily be argued that readers are constantly transacting with texts. This is Rosenblatt's transactional reader response theory. My purpose in the second portion of this analysis was to compare the lesson plan as written to the best practices in literacy instruction in general, and fictional narrative comprehension in specific. Through this method of comparison, I would gain a sense of the quality of instruction that might occur as a result of using this lesson plan. I have concluded that the plans provided by Reading A to Z align with many good and best practices, but they don't do so entirely. Like many pre-written lessons from most core programs, they fall short of fully implementing best practices, because lesson plans cannot create a classroom culture that nurtures literacy motivation by integrating choice, collaboration, and relevance into literacy tasks. Gombrell et alia, 2015. A generic plan removes the social context of learning and expects all students to use the same strategies in the same way for the same outcome. Almasi and Hart, page 231. Programs can't address or anticipate transfer from structured practice to independent use, nor can they provide the type of explicit instruction or the gradual release of responsibility that is foundational to comprehensive strategies instruction. Almasi and Hart, page 231. Additionally, numerous studies have indicated that core reading programs tend to focus on teaching the use of strategies in isolation rather than as part of a process, as in transactional strategies instruction, or TSI. As a result, students do not develop the procedural and conditional knowledge associated with strategy use. Almasi and Hart, page 230. In this section, I examined the leveled reader lesson plan from Reading A to Z that accompanies the text Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, a narrative fairy tale. My goal was to see how well individual lessons address the Common Core state standards in reading, literature, at a second grade level. This guided reading lesson focused on 5 standards, 3 of which are reading. 1 is speaking and listening, and the other is language. 4 out of 5 standards were structured in such a way that students could easily master the standard. The activity accompanying the remaining standard, Language 2.4c, has to do with using a base word to determine the meaning of unknown word with the same base. It only made use of the suffixes full and ness and would not lead to mastery of the standard. In fact, it was so weak that it seemed pointless. Strengths and weaknesses of the program. Strengths. Many standards are revisited over the course of leveled instruction. The teacher has the option of choosing texts that focus on the same standards. They can also be aligned with standards being studied in a focused text from a core program. They can be used to enhance a core program. And they're useful for guided reading instruction and progress monitoring. The weaknesses in this platform are that there is no scope and sequence. And if it's being used as a core program, the teacher would have to develop her own scope and sequence and supplement language and grammar activities. Additionally, she would need to track every time she used a particular standard. Comprehension strategies are taught in isolation, and this is not a best practice. So these are my recommendations. You should familiarize yourself with Reading A to Z's platform before you use it. Do not use the leveled reader lesson plans as they are written. Sit down with them and tailor instruction to meet the literacy needs of your students. Remember, it's up to the teacher's discretion to make use of the additional resources based upon the needs of her students. Numerous studies have indicated that the teacher is the crucial factor in the classroom. In fact, study after study points to the teacher's expertise as the critical variable in effective literacy instruction. Gombrell et alia, page 26. Invest in and read Best Practices in Literacy Instruction by Linda Gombrell and Leslie Morrow. These thorough analyses of research highlight, explain, and provide many examples of best practices throughout literacy. Familiarize yourself with transactional strategy instruction, also known as TSI, and procedures for implementing dialogic strategy instruction. Last, but certainly not least, do everything in your power to create a classroom culture across the curriculum that integrates choice, value, motivation, collaboration, and relevance to students' lives. Thanks so much for listening.